This episode contains sensitive content. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to the Culture Podcast, where we uncover the hidden mechanics of high control groups, their tactics, and their impact. And we speak with the survivors who broke free. My name is Derek, and I'm your host.
My name is Trinity, and I'm also your host. On this podcast, we explore cult life as real people who have lived through the life-changing process of leaving a high-control group.
Hello, welcome back to the podcast. Really happy to once again be with Trinity, but also to share some time today with Devan. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Derek and Trinity. This truly an honor. You know, I never thought I would have a platform to where I could share in my experiences growing up in a religious setting that coincide with what you and Trinity have been talking about. And, the control system in so many various situations, I don't know, just looking at them, there's a lot of similarities with your story and mine.
Yeah, we're really happy to have you on. It's really interesting as we talk with more people. It's just a natural thing that a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses would be on this podcast. But I think one of the interesting things as Trent and I chat with you is you actually were not raised in the Jehovah's Witness faith,
That's correct. Yeah.
and so this is definitely very interesting in my mind to really get your take, because in the moment I talk with someone who's a Jehovah's Witness, and Trent, I'm sure you feel exactly the same. We know a lot of what their story is already about, even if it's unspoken. So I think there's something to anytime we can chat with someone who's willing to come on here and detail their life with us. You were raised in a Christian faith, but you start to realize not every Christian faith is exactly the same. So it's definitely look forward to kind of unpacking a lot with you today, Devan.
Yeah.
For the listeners as well, Devan and I do know each other. We live in the same town in Oregon.
Yeah.
And it's been nice to get know you locally, and that's how we kind of connected today. It's been a treat to get to know you personally, and excited to get you know you a little bit more in depth here as we chat on the pod.
Yeah. We'll see if you want to still hang out after this.
Yeah.
I was curious about what religion you were raised in, because it sounds like you were raised Christian, but what religion?
So I did grow up a fundamentalist Christian, which interestingly enough, that would be from the Southern Baptist side of Christianity, so Protestant in nature. But what I grew up in my belief system was, I was taught that we as sinners, we're sinners in the hands of an angry God. And even though that sounds kind of Old Testament for those of us who know the Bible in the Hebraic form, it's very Old Testament type of behavior. But in order to become a Christian, in Christianity, you have to accept Jesus. And this is this other form of God that we are taught, this gracious, personable, whatever type of entity, rather than this wrathful, angry God that was initially like, hey, this is our situation. You sin, you're going to be punished, right? But Jesus says, love your neighbor. So you have this. And for me, growing up my dad was a son of a Baptist preacher, and uh, so my dad was very rigid in his authoritarian style, Old Testament style, but there was grace in the fact that, yeah, we're saved by grace, but damn it, if you do something wrong, there are consequences.
Yeah.
And so I grew up in a real fear-based and kind of validation-seeking, very high anxiety childhood.
When you say there'll be consequences, I of course think of two things. I think of future consequences, maybe your version of hell. But I think you're also talking about consequences in the present.
I am talking about consequences, from my earthly father. Let's
Yeah,
say, if we're speaking in spiritual concepts,
yeah,
my earthly father. So in the way I was grew up in a authoritarian household, those consequences were not met with, "Hey, you did something wrong here, but we can change that, and I can help you understand why you did what you did."
yeah,
And there's more of a shepherd type of relationship, like teaching you as you go. My household that I grew up in, it was like punishment, and that was it.
yeah.
Punishment, but don't do that again. But I love you. And so I never really grew up even knowing what a healthy type of love was, with communication and interaction that way. So those are the consequences, I mean.
Yeah, it's such a curiosity because I don't know how you think, Trent, but the more you start to see, and you touched on it, Devin, there's this God of the Old Testament and a God of the New Testament.
Hmm.
And gosh, do they seem so different.
Oh, night and day.
It's a
Yeah.
really complicated thing for me because the Old Testament and New Testament are very different in their messaging. And I think when you search the New Testament for the word love, it appears way more than in the Old Testament.
Hmm.
And then there's the added the added belief of most Baptists in the Trinity. And so then
Hmm.
it's like you have God of the Old Testament very demanding, jealous, wrathful, but then, is Jesus part of the same being? Are they wrapped up into one? So it's a very confusing thing to me.
And I think there's a confusion too because we were taught that God is love. And you talk about Devin, growing up in an authoritarian environment where it seems like love was absent to some extent with your upbringing with your father, the way it may have been spoken about in the New Testament.
Hmm.
So it's confusing.
Yeah, very confusing. And so just even trying to identify with this Jesus character was, I accepted Jesus when I was very young, but I had no concept of the words I was speaking, or even the idea that I was bringing on to my own subconscious, you know. And it really played a huge part later on in my life, like, uh, we'll possibly get to today. What I do find, though, in growing up in that atmosphere, we were then very isolated. So my parents, I think I was around 5 or 6. They got My dad was a business major out of Portland, and he was selling vacuum cleaners and steam cleaners on the street, door to door. And this was back in the early 70s. When I was 5 or 6, he got an opportunity to work at a Christian camp. So basically, direct this huge conference center way out in the boonies, like outside in the Coast Range, outside of Salem, Oregon.
Hmm.
And so it was about 30 minutes to the nearest town. It was like old logging roads to get to this place. So that's where my formative years really started. That's what I can really start to remember as a kid. I don't really remember anything before that, but what I remember is my dad finally came into his own. Like, he was accepted into the fold. He was now a part of this Christian ministry, and it became more fundamentalist in the sense of he had a mission now. He wasn't selling steam cleaners door to door,
Mm.
and it really also, for that era, those boomers seeking validation to his pastor father, who had passed in 76. So this would have been 77, 78 when we moved to this campground. And so his father never got to see him succeed in this ministry that I think he was really wrapped up in. And so that became his life. I mean, we were second, or third. I mean, it would have been, my dad and his mission, and then my mom and us kids. And it was we saw very little of him. We lived in the camp year round. And so we were totally isolated. We were homeschooled. We learned how to live off the land. My parents were huge preppers. It was back in the 80s, which was the satanic panic kind of era. My parents thought, well, this is the end of the world. It's happening, so we better prepare. And I don't know in your belief system that you grew up in if preparation for Armageddon was, I've heard you both talk about it a little bit, but this was like the rapture for the Christians. It's like
Yeah.
all going to get taken away, but there's going to be some trouble beforehand, so we better start prepping food and water and
Yeah, the Jehovah's Witness side was very much, and I only remember this happening in like the 2000s. This was never a mindset. I'm curious your take, Trent, growing up, if you felt this before, but in the 2000s, it was like you got to start preparing your go bags.
Yep.
And the Jehovah's Witnesses have this mindset that before Armageddon happens, there'll be a time frame called the Great Tribulation. And the
mm-hmm,
Great Tribulation will basically be when the governments are against us and all the people are against us. And during that time frame, it'll be very difficult. And then after that will be Armageddon, the end of the world. And then after that will be on a paradise earth. And then only a small subset of people will go to heaven. Was that a good recap, Trent?
I think so. And I think culturally among witnesses, some witnesses were preppers. You had
Yeah.
some that were definitely doing more than just the go bag. But in some different cultures of witness, it was frowned upon to make too many preparations because you had to have ultimate faith in God. So
Mhm.
it was like, two camps of preparing for Armageddon.
It's a interesting mindset to have growing up at a youth, and your parents are hardcore preppers and truly believe the rapture is going to come at any moment. And there is a parallel with witnesses where I basically my entire life thought that Armageddon was just around the corner at any moment. And
mm-hmm,
it does echo the mindset of fear.
mm-hmm.
I had a couple layers of fear. I had fear of my father, and just kind of his angry ways at times. And then I had fear of like, oh, I'm not doing well enough. I'm shameful. I'm sinful. I don't know if I'll make it. We have to be baptized to make it. So I better get baptized. So there's kind of a lot with that. But I did want to ask you, and you'd kind of mentioned it very briefly, is you kind of moved out far away and you lived in this camp type environment.
Yeah.
What did the camp structure kind of look like?
So it was very interesting. It was a large group of buildings. There was cabins for boys, cabins for girls that were built. There was a big lodge that had a cafeteria, dining rooms. There was another building that they did their camp skits and worship. The old campfire down by the river where everyone went down and did kumbaya, and new girlfriends were made, and you know
Yeah.
that kind of thing. But before we get too far away from it, so in Armageddon, there's something that I wanted to bring up.
Yeah.
So for I remember as a child around this time finding out that my parents were preppers and what the end of the world was going to look like. They would show us this movie called Distant Thunder that some Christian organization put out in the 70s. And basically, it was about rounding up all the Christians. And if you didn't take the mark of the beast, you would then get your head cut off with a guillotine. And
Whoa.
that's what we got to watch as kids. It's like, this is going to happen. Men's and machine guns and army tanks and whatnot are going to be filing you through this system. And if you don't get in, the mark of the beast on your forehead or hand, then that means you're going to die.
This
Heavy.
This
Yeah.
is I just looked it up and it seems very similar actually to the movie that they show Jehovah's Witnesses that
Oh,
we've talked about before, 2016,
Yeah,
2015.
2015 or so.
wow.
Very similar. Police and governments are rounding you up and you're, taking shelter in your church.
It's
Crazy.
scary. It's
Yeah.
genuinely scary. Like there's this fear. You see this imagery, and it's one thing too when you see, well, there's a few things in my mind. It's one thing to create the imagery based on scripture or, written word. it's another thing to see the imagery that they're creating for you to really paint that picture, that video image.
Yeah.
But either way, it's like this is some scary shit, man.
How old were you when you first saw that?
I have to say I was around 7 or 8. Yeah, I could be wrong on the date, but I just remember at a very young age they showed us this film, and this would have been at one of these camps. Okay, so you asked me about the camp. So it was a camp that opened up in the summer. So different Baptist churches around Washington, California, Oregon would come during the summer, and parents would drop their kids off for a week, 2 weeks, and basically they would just run around and they would be uh, the staff would have been pulled from different Baptist churches. So you had counselors that were from different churches around the state. And then the Baptist church itself would help fund any repairs for this conference center. And my dad was getting a salary. And so it was a very well oiled machine in regards to pushing this message.
Yeah. That's so it's like a Bible camp.
Yep.
Witnesses never had anything like that. We never had a structure where the children were separate. There was no, special Sunday school, there was no special kids. It was like we were always with the adults in the main auditorium learning about Armageddon. And
Hmm.
really interesting every time I hear of basically almost every other religion. It's like, no, they kind of have these extra things, but then it's also kind of fascinating to hear like they weren't even watering it down for you as a child. It was like, no, this is
This is reality. Yeah.
yeah, the reality is like we're not going to sugarcoat this. Like the end of the world is coming, and you better be ready.
Such a scary thing for kids to think about. I mean, I'm still traumatized by it, just thinking about the end of the world and Armageddon and losing
Yeah.
people and all that. It's a lot.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, like, it's sometimes it's hard as a person that young, but as you get older and you have time to reflect, like those times at that camp, and watching these kind of fear based videos, how did that shape you?
It shaped me in a way where I became very just on guard. So when I finally broke free in my early 20s, uh, actually when I was 19, I broke away from that. What I found myself in, I was just so guarded that everybody was held at arm's length, and I didn't have really any close relationships except this one boss that I did in my early 20s. I was selling shoes at Fred Meyer's back in the day when Fred Meyer's actually had a shoe department that you'd go in and sit down and someone would help you try shoes on. But other than that friendship, I just could not trust anybody, at that point. So it was just like you have to put your trust in God. God is going to lead you in and out of situations. And so there was really, even relationally, because I didn't really develop a relationship with my mom and dad as a child, because emotionally, they just did not have anything to give us kids. And so there was no emotional connection. And so that development there. Now, would I say that that is because of the faith, the Christian faith? Absolutely not. It was
Yeah.
just the way they were raised.
Hmm.
In a very, their parents were coming out of the Depression, Second World War, and so I don't know. My generation. There's a lot of Generation Xers early on. I was born in '71. That I think we had a lot of authority in our life at that
Hmm.
age.
Yeah.
There's a lot of families that have that, um, that they can recall that. But for me, when I did finally break free in my 20s, I would say I was just like, wow, I have been fed a line of bullshit. I don't have to be scared. I don't. I can just be a child of the 90s, like the child of the 60s, where they figured out that they could break free from any government type of thing and they were pushing back. That's kind of how I felt in the early 90s. And the grunge scene is kind of what I fell into. And
Oh
it
yeah, and it
was,
being so close to Seattle, you're in
yeah,
the thick of it.
Yeah.
Do you I guess it brings up a question. Was there an intentional desire to break free? Or was this just something that was kind of like, "Hey, I'm a teenager now. I just kinda wanna do my own thing."
Well, what I think happened for me is, and we'll kind of move away from the camping ministry and my parents, but we we somehow in the direction life took my parents in 91, they were moving out of Washington from another Christian camp that they were directing, and I was 16 at the time. No, I guess that would have been 89. I'm sorry. 87, 80, 87, 88. All these dates. They're very
It's all good.
impactful in my life. But um, in 87, we moved back to Oregon from Washington. And my dad did not have a camping job. He had to get a job at working at Fred Meyer's. And for me, I had been homeschooled all the way up until I graduated from high school.
Mm,
So I had not been in any public school. I had not um, been really interacting with any of the outside world. It was all focused on this camp that was isolated. And so, the only kids that I saw were the kids coming to the camp in the summer. And so those relationships were 1 week and then they'd go home.
yeah.
And so I never
Very
really,
transitory.
yeah, yeah, I really um, didn't have time to develop any friendships.
It's just a snapshot.
Yeah.
Do you think that was on purpose, or was it just uh I guess like just happened because they were at the camp?
I would have to say, I mean, my dad would have always taken a step back and go, oh my goodness, my children are not growing up in a way that is going to help them interact with the world. I mean, there is a world outside of this camp. There was no future tripping about what us kids were going to do. It was all about the mission for him. And so I think that is a big part of the puzzle that I missed as a young person growing up. And so when we moved back to Oregon, I was taken to a community college to take my high school diploma test. I received a diploma in community college. And then my dad was like, all right, you're going to college. And I'm like, what?
Like 16, like, "Here we go."
Yeah, yeah, 16. When I turned 17, there was an opportunity. I had actually decided that I wanted to be a police officer at 16. And so I was taking criminal justice courses in the community college I was in. And I had become what is called an explorer in some police departments. And basically, they take candidates, young teenagers, to kind of develop them and then eventually give them a job in their department. So I was kind of getting involved in that, and I really wanted to become a police officer. I thought that was my uncle was a police officer and he was a pastor, Baptist pastor. So I thought, hey, I can be a Christian and be a police officer. That's okay.
Yeah.
And so I had that opportunity there. And then my folks received an opportunity for a Bible school scholarship in England for me to go to. And I didn't really have a say.
Mm.
They said, we want you to go to this college in England. Well, I had never been away from home. I mean, like I said, home was where I lived day in and day out. There was
And
no
went to
go
school.
and went to school and did chores and did my job, whatever. So I was 18 when I went to England, and that is when I really started meeting other Christian people who were Christians that I had no idea that they didn't care about the rapture. They didn't care about the end of the world. They didn't care about all of the judgment
You had a level of enlightenment that was starting to happen.
and a level of enlightenment, and then another narrative about who God really is.
How was that? What is that experience like when you're that age? Just like, "Wait a minute. You're a different version of Christianity."
Yeah. It's so what does that mean? Does that mean the one I grew up in was wrong? Or
Yeah.
are you wrong? Because so I had a lot of doubt, right? I spent 6 months in England at this school and then decided I met this Israeli character that had come from Israel, and he was a barber. And he said, hey, there's a youth hostel down in Haifa, Israel, and they're always looking for people to come on staff and work in a hostel. You get all these different people coming through, you get to meet all different kinds of people. So I wrote them a letter at the hostel and said, hey, I'm 18 years old. I'm from the US, but I don't want to really go home. This has been exciting to kind of meet a new type of Christianity. And so they invited me to come to Israel. So that would have been 1989. No, that would have been 1990. And so that was just on the precipice of the first Gulf War with Kuwait.
Yeah.
So I spent 6 months working at a hostel in Israel, and I really just kind of became a beatnik. Traveled a lot, lived on the beach, worked in the hostel for a couple of bucks, and then the Gulf War broke out. And in Israel, every 3 months, you have to leave the country to renew your visitor's visa. So my 6 months was up. I tried to renew my visa, and then my parents called me and they're like, hey, this is going to be a war in the Middle East. This could be Armageddon. This could be
Mm,
it's being attacked. We've got to have you come home. And they scared the shit out of me.
yeah.
And everything that I learned, I lost at that moment.
Because it had been so deeply ingrained as a
Yeah.
child.
Yeah. It just like it clicked. It's like, yep. Oh, wow. It all makes sense.
Yeah, and it's coming from your parents.
Yeah,
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 huge.
still that very strong authority in my life, and so I came back home. That would have been in '90, and my dad said, "Hey, you've got to get your hair cut." I'd grown my hair real long. It's like you got to get a haircut, got to go back to college, and get on with your life. And I'm just like, wait a minute, you just said the end of the world is going to happen. Now you want me to just go out and make it for myself? Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that's another confusing thing because yeah, you're hearing this narrative from your father, and then it's like, yeah, but you need to like prepare for real life,
yeah.
and it's like, well, what do we have to prepare for? It's just around the corner, you know?
Yeah.
I think
So,
that's one blessing though, because you at least got to go to college, whereas many witnesses are like, "Hey, Armageddon's coming. You don't need to prepare. Just
okay.
grow your faith and don't go to college." Me and Derek specifically never got the chance.
Well, that's one of the things too is Jehovah's Witnesses. Yeah, it's frowned upon to go to college, and I think that I don't know. Trent and I go back and forth. I'm sure every witness does, like whether it's intentional or not. But it's like, gosh, you really do find yourself in college. You get levels of enlightenment. You take philosophy courses. You take these classes. You're around peers that are at a stage in life that throw different mindsets back at you, and different religions, and it's really this melting pot of many things that help shape you. And so witnesses are like, you're not getting any of that.
Wow. Yeah.
And so yeah, so it's really really great, like that you were able to get a piece of that. But now you're back, and Armageddon
Yeah.
has not come.
It's not come. I'm back in school. My opportunity with the police department did not work out. My folks had moved further south in this would have been in the Portland area that I was going to move back to finish out becoming a cop, right? So that didn't happen, and I had to start school outside of Salem. Back in the day, it was or excuse me, it was a college in Monmouth, Oregon, OCE, I think it was called, Western Oregon University, and there I saw what the secular world is really all about. I saw a lot in my travels in Israel, just the secular world, but I was still just kind of like in limbo of, fully ingesting what the secular world had to offer. And so when I came back and went to college there, I met some guys and they got me into it really quick. I mean, I started, it was my first drug use was in my 19s. I was 19 or 20 and started hitting the bars, um, and just kind of getting into that culture of, hey, the system is going to control you. And for the United States of America in those years, Christianity was tied really heavy to the government.
Mhm.
George Bush was in office. We have to radicalize the Muslims are radicalized, and so we have to radicalize the Christians to push against the Muslims, and they just use that push and pull back and forth, and that's kind of where uh, the grunge culture kind of was like, fuck that.
Yeah.
You guys don't need to be a part of that. So it was kind of a reiteration of the 60s, but in a really more just in your face kind of way with the music and whatnot. And then, of course, the drug culture was really big and just part.
Was there a level of, I don't know how to phrase this, like a level of curiosity, and rebellion with wanting to kinda get involved in drug culture and alcohol, and what was your mindset with that?
My mindset was my dad and mom with this faith of theirs, their Christian belief, the end of the world type situation. They're just all controlled.
Mhm.
They're controlled in this narrative when there's this whole other world outside of that. And if you cannot, for my folks, their ministry was to other Christians. And if you really believe in Jesus and his mission, it was all non believers. It was believers, and then Gentiles after he was crucified in our belief system. And so it's like they weren't trying to reach non-believers. They were just trying to prepare believers for the tribulation or for the rapture or whatever. So there's this mindset that I separated from, thinking, this is never going to happen. My parents have been living, sleeping on a bed of grain my whole childhood. Like, we had bins of grain underneath, and that was their bed that they threw a
Wow.
mattress on. And
Wow.
so I was just like, this is way too fictional for me. I've got to at least believe something that's right in front of my face. And what was real was other people reacting the same way I wanted to outside of that belief system. And so I really did. I veered far off the path of having a faith, in anything really other than the faith in, hey, I just want to feel good.
You make me think of this mindset, and I think that there's a crime, and I don't believe it's fully intentional, but there's a crime in not preparing a child to be a part of the actual world they're in.
Right.
There's a there
Like a form of neglect.
there yeah, there's a form of neglect in, you talk about, being secular. And when you approach, in my opinion, when you approach every single situation you're in with one foot in, one foot out, you never truly experience the situation you're in. So you're not getting the proper data from each of those experiences. It's very tainted. And then there's a rubber band effect
Mm-hmm.
when you finally go like, fuck this, or this is bullshit. I'm just gonna go live life. And I think the unfortunate thing is the rubber band springs for a lot of people, and then they do really dive into being extremely counter to their upbringing.
Absolutely.
And I don't know if that's your case, but I see that with a lot of people, and it's just like, well, I would just want to go live,
Yeah.
you know. Um, so you're in the 90s now, and you're surrounding yourself by people that are people having similar conversations with you about their kind of Christian upbringing and how this doesn't align with how they think as well.
Very few people that I came in contact with did I have conversations about that at all.
Hmm.
Um, Unfortunately, as I look back, I wish I would have been a little more philosophical. But I'll be honest with you, I just had no information to be philosophical. I'll be honest with you, up until I started listening to Coast, that's when I really started to go, oh my goodness, these guys are actually scientists and they're talking about these either spiritual things or outside of this world type of thing or whatever. So I was just day by day, moment by moment, just like meeting the need of feeling good,
Yeah.
and so not really asking a lot of questions, not really trying to get a lot of information. I was just, a sheep at that point, just wanting to be a part of a flock, you know, and
Yeah.
it was just a middle finger to the government, middle finger to Christianity. Which unfortunately, when I was in Israel, I met so many people with so many different walks of life. Like I met Baha'i people who were
Mm.
Baha'i, or I met Muslims, who I met, of course, Israelis, um, and then the beatniks who lived on the beach. There was this sect of Dutch people that had been living on the beach in Tel Aviv and down in Eilat, which is the most southern tip of Israel, and they'd lived there for years, and that was their life. And they believed in a creator. I remember getting high once out on the beach with them, and they were talking about this creator that just wanted people to have peace and be free and enjoy what is before them and live simply. And it was really also against the system too, because the system wants you to go to school, get a job, get a family. And so that my father kind of transitioned out of this authoritarian man on a mission to this ultra conservative Christian man. Was like, all right, now it's time to get the job done. So you got to go to college, Devin. You got to get a job, and we really want you to start paying rent if you can't move out. That kind of a narrative.
Yeah.
And so I was just really thrust into that and trying to figure it out. And I ended up leaving home. And when I would come back to visit, in this new lifestyle I was living, there was always this guilt narrative. And up until my early 40s, Derek, it was a guilt narrative. Like all this, no matter what kind of contact I would have with my parents, every time I would have contact, it was this guilt narrative. You failed at this or that job, really? You're there? Or what are you doing here? And it was never good enough. So that's kind of what I fell into. So,
Yeah, I always think about the equation of for my experience, it's like I'm never going to be better than God
right.
and God's lofty standards. And I think it goes back to my mind the crime of people that were our parents that truly believe that want a great life for their children. The crime is they just, in my opinion, just took them down a path that wasn't as open as we really need.
Hmm.
You talk about these memories and these thoughts of being in Israel. Can you imagine? You had that time, but it's also time lost because that would have been a much different experience if you
Oh,
had an open mindset about everything.
yeah. Yeah.
You, from my opinion, and correct me if I'm wrong, but your opinion was, well, you're not a true believer, or you don't really have the truth. And so it just kind of shapes you where you're unwilling to live in that moment
Right.
and go like, oh, they have the truth in this moment.
Yeah.
And I love sharing that truth with them. And then taking just a morsel of that back with me in my own life.
Yeah. Yeah. No, no, I think you hit the nail on the head there. And unfortunately, I missed a lot of opportunities to really grow and expand
Yeah.
and just receive that knowledge.
What did the exact, if you could relay maybe to Trent and I and our listeners, like what did some of that shame and guilt and things look like through your parents, and specifically maybe both your mother and father, and how they made you feel that way? What were they doing?
I think it was just the lack of emotional connection that I had with them. And so when I bring, I've been married twice. So in my first marriage, I was courting this girl who had two children, which was way outside of the box for a Christian family.
You're a rebel.
Oh, yeah. And, but in my mind, I was like, if I do this and I marry her along with these children, I am a good guy.
Yeah.
And my dad is going to be like, wow, you have such a heart for people. You have a heart to take care of, make this family whole, and bring them, love and generosity and whatnot. But that didn't happen. It was like my folks were they didn't have to say anything to send me the message that I was fucked and that I fucked up. They could just be like looking at me, and without shaking their head, they were shaking their head, you know.
Mm.
So, and I think that right there just made me double down on that stuff and just be like, well, I'm going to show you then. You know, if you're going to, not receive me and my decisions wholly, and or give me some constructive feedback even, if you're just going to be quiet and smile like what we did on Sundays when I was a kid after being spanked an hour before for doing something, we always would show up to church just, hey, everything's wonderful. We're all in this together, kind of thing. But at home, it was not that way.
Yeah, I have this mindset about religion. Just seems like it always preaches very top level stuff.
Mm,
You don't learn attunement. You don't learn to actively listen. You don't learn there's all these things that you just are never taught because it's very top level stuff. Well, love thy neighbor. And it's it's like none of these are giving us the proper tools in order to be good people, good fathers, good um sons. It's always just really horrible. It's like I wish, they talk about, well, the manual for life is the Bible. Well, it's like if the manual for life was the Bible, it's incomplete.
yeah.
Well, the application is part of the problem too, because for instance, Jesus constantly cared for orphans. And he said, your father is my father up in the heavens, or something like that. And
Mm,
so to me, the cognitive dissonance is still, it's not the witnesses, but it's still there, because here you have a potential partner with two kids who are kind of orphans. And rather than being praised for caring for them, you're getting judged for that because it doesn't fit a mold of your father's liking.
mm.
I'd like to ask you two questions. One just to touch on real quick, and then one about the current situation you're talking about. Um, quickly, were you baptized into this fundamentalist Christian
I was.
congregation? What did that look like?
I've been baptized twice. So,
So you've been
and
saved twice.
yeah, yeah. So as a young kid, I was baptized, and basically what that is a proclamation of your faith in Jesus. You're going to work hard at being a good Bible believing Christian. You're going to spread the gospel, and so it's a proclamation to the community of other believers that are there participating. But my later baptism is a lot different. It just comes from a different narrative,
Sure.
which leads to why I still have a faith today.
Yeah. Oh,
And
well.
and
Let's
but
when we get to that part, I'd love you to touch on that a little bit
sure,
more.
sure.
Um, was this first baptism? Because Jehovah's Witnesses are fully submerged in water.
Hmm.
They have to make their choice,
Yep,
quote unquote, make their own choice. Is was that how your first baptism was? A full water submersion?
it was. Yeah.
And was that like in a creek? Was that
That was actually in a Baptist church. Yeah. They
okay?
filed us in. There's a group of us boys. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then did you have to make like a personal dedication to God? Did was this a kind of a prayer thought
It
out?
it was, we would follow the questions or the narrative of the pastor before we got baptized, and he would say, "Do you believe in Jesus Christ as your only Savior? Um, are you willing to follow Him for the rest of your life?" And then there's a third one that is escaping me, but and then if you say "I do" to all of those, then you get dunked and then brought up, and then everybody claps and he says, "Welcome to our community."
That is so similar to witness baptisms. That's eerie. I've never heard that before.
Yeah.
Well, and thank you for sharing. And I guess like at that time, how old were you?
I would have been 5 or 6. I was young.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
that might be challenged, but do you feel at the time, did you feel Holy Spirit come upon you? Did you have a feeling of like, "Oh my gosh, I'm saved," or "I'm part of this"?
No, whatever undeveloped ego I had,
Yeah,
it was ego because I felt a part of the community. I do
right.
remember that specifically. I remember, oh, they've accepted me. I'm
Yeah,
one of them. It was very, I don't like to say this, but it's very cult like because it was like, now you are a part of this mission. Now you can really start receiving orders.
yeah.
Now you are directed by the God above. And it isn't about any of us anymore. Your
Hmm.
mission is this. And so, of course, that didn't last very long because it was ego.
Yeah. Yeah, if you're going into it for the wrong reason, and I
Yeah.
guess you could argue at that age, I don't feel like you're mentally equipped to make
No,
it be the right reason whatsoever.
no,
And my second question, so this woman that you're with and end up marrying with 2 children, was she also of the same faith?
she was. She was in Christian communities. Somebody who doesn't go to church and doesn't practice the faith, they're called backslidden. So she
Oh.
would be considered a backslider with
We
two
call that
children.
inactive in the Jehovah's Witnesses.
Okay, yeah.
Mm.
And so um, I started. I was gonna prove to my parents that I was gonna make this work, and so we started going to church, and um, it only lasted. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, it's interesting the more you kind of break it apart, Trent, and saying inactive and that comparison. I know that if me personally, if I was inactive and decided I need to start doing better, I need to start going back to the kingdom hall or the church, I need to get back in line with the religion. And at the same time, I also met a partner who wasn't an active Jehovah's Witness. I would get guilt and shame from everyone in the congregation.
100%.
Mm,
Um, and for me personally, it would probably be a similar narrative to maybe what you were about to say before I cut you off. So I apologize. Of yeah, but we're gonna turn it around. Like we're doing this for the right reasons. We're gonna help each other kind of get back on the right path.
hmm
And maybe to some extent it's the lies because I was inactive for a time, and it's the lies maybe we tell ourselves to kind of think we're doing the right thing. But yeah, continue with what you're saying. I apologize.
Yeah, so we had started going back to church. Now the two children were out of two different marriages for her, so I would have been her third marriage. And I had no clue what the fuck I was getting into. Absolutely. I mean, I was 26 when I got married to her, and I had very little relationships outside of that I was really with. Like, I didn't have a girlfriend for very long before that. I had a couple of sexual experiences, but I was still very closed off and didn't want to get into relationships. They scared me. That commitment scared me. And, but something about the situation, I was 26 and I had to get my shit together and I had to prove my point. And so I think that was the driving force of that. And, we moved here to Bend, Oregon together. This would have been back in 97. And so uh, we didn't last very long. She was an ad exec for Z21. It's a local TV station. I don't know if I could say that.
Oh, that's fine.
But anyways, she ended up having an affair with the anchor man. And I was like, well, that's a cardinal sin.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to get us back on track. And what do I do? So I'm like meeting with the pastor of the church we're going to locally every day, and I'm trying to figure out if this is going to work. Now, the other side of me, that fallen away side of me, I was drinking heavily. No one knew. I wasn't drinking socially. I was drinking to black out.
Mm.
I had no clue what I was going to do in this situation. I had no clue what I was doing raising two kids with a woman that I didn't even know how to love, right?
Yeah.
So that ended in 2000. She ended up divorcing me and moving away back to Eugene. And so I was here for 5 years in Bend before I met my next wife, which you know, Amy.
Can
Yeah.
I ask you, well, again, I have two things.
Yeah.
So I'll try to try to keep it all together. Um, do you recall some of the advice the pastor was giving you during those years, those moments?
He was all about reconciliation. He was about, look, we're humans. We make mistakes. In my upbringing, making a mistake was not something you could come back from gently, right? And so reconciliation was very hard for me to understand um, from my upbringing. You just had to be perfect all the time or not get caught. That was basically, I learned early on how to fly under the radar. That's why I was drinking alone. That's why I was sneaking it around, because I knew how to do that stuff and I would act a certain way. I was actually living in two different realities. I was living
Yeah.
in the reality of my body saying, screaming for freedom and get away and figure it out and fucking go live on a beach somewhere. Get out of this nonsense. What are you doing? You can't take care of a family. You can't raise two kids. You're an idiot. It was kind of like the Tyler Durden
Yeah.
of the Fight Club movie that was
Sure.
sitting there saying, dude, you're a fucking, what are you doing?
Yeah.
So I had
So
these,
it's
yeah.
so yeah, so he was what I find is sometimes it's like, yes, we have the narrative of the Bible, we have the narrative of the scripture and kind of what the letter
Hmm.
of the law is. And then we often see there's then it's kind of, well, the man, the pastor, the priest, the elder, who you're talking to might kind of shift that narrative, based on what's happening in the moment. Because I agree with you that that should be the cardinal sin that gives you the separation.
It did in
Uh,
the end.
yeah. So it's
Yeah.
like, I guess my mind is, well, and this is more subjective because there may be no answer, but why would that person give that advice to try to stick it out when this is the letter of the law that I have now grounds for divorce?
This
Just wanted to be.
pastor, his background, he was very much into grace,
Mhm.
humility, reconciliation. We are all broken.
Yeah.
So that narrative is in more progressive Christianity nowadays.
Yeah.
It was like come as you are type of narrative, more accepting, more like, look, we're going to put away the Old Testament for a while, and it's
Yeah.
not going to be so much about the letter of the law, but it's going to be about if you are willing, man, come as you are. And, it kind of gives people more freedom to be objective,
Yeah.
right? It doesn't give them an alternative.
In that time frame, did you feel like that aligned with where your heart was?
I didn't know that yet. I
Yeah.
really didn't. I was still very letter of the law.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I don't blame you
yeah,
based on your father, right?
right, right.
Um, see,
Because he was still in the background. He was still
yeah,
there, right? And I would come and tell him what my pastor was saying, and he'd be like, "Look, what are you gonna do?"
yeah.
You know, and
Now I didn't forget, so I guess maybe finish your thought because I didn't forget my second question.
okay, no,
We're
I
good.
lost.
Okay.
We're
Okay.
good.
We're in and out. So my second question, and this one is probably the tougher one, is what at that time was causing you to drink?
The shame, the guilt. I knew I was stuck. I think I had made a decision to take on this responsibility of this woman and two kids, and I really hated myself for it because it wasn't fair. It wasn't fair to them, and it wasn't fair to me. And my reality of trying to impress my father
Mm.
really started to break down. It's like, look, you're never going. And maybe it's just that coming of age moment too, where you're finally,
Yeah.
your brain is finally formed and it's coming together.
Yeah. So you didn't feel like you could have been a good partner at that time. Was some of it? What specifically, I guess, was some of the shame and the guilt?
The shame and the guilt was, here I am in this church
Yeah.
trying to develop a new faith with this new family, and here we are breaking apart. So I'm failing the Christian narrative myself because my family, I can't keep them together,
Yeah.
right? And so I think a lot of that is just that old narrative kind of bleeding through, when in reality I could come to church single. I could
Hmm.
come to church with, this church was very accepting of that.
It's so hard to rewrite our own program, man.
Yeah.
It's so hard.
Oh,
And you talk about stuff, and sometimes, if we're in the present moment at 26, there's times where it's like, dude, I'm an adult. I got this.
right.
And we only get that distance with age, and the gray beards we're all growing, and
Yeah.
and go like, dude, I wasn't equipped at all at 26.
Yeah.
I couldn't fathom at 26 trying to raise two kiddos,
Yeah.
much less now to some extent.
I mean, coming from an apartment with a bunch of dudes that were getting drunk and high every night. I mean, yeah. And watching, Ren and Stimpy.
Yeah.
Uh, and
Oh,
I know
classic.
that dates me, but Beavis and Butthead, that those
Yeah.
things, it's like, oh, what am I doing? So I know we're getting close to running out on time, but I really want to
Well, we
wrap
can
this
go
up.
we can go as long as you like.
Okay.
If you're pressed for time,
I'm not.
no, we can go as long as you like.
Okay. Well,
Yeah. I mean, we just did one that was 2.5 hours. So,
this one
uh,
gets in the weeds.
yeah. So by all means, Trent, the moment you say, "Hey, we gotta wind it down in the next 30 minutes," let us know. But
I've got to wrap up in about 30, but that doesn't mean you guys can't keep going.
okay, cool. Um, and what we might be able to do too is separate this into two episodes.
Yeah.
So that's a
Yeah.
possibility as well. So
Yeah.
right now you're living with this woman, and um, kind of where are we at with that? You're married.
So, so upon moving to Bend, I was working for a produce company out of Portland, and I was running produce. That's when I was listening to a lot of the Art Bell coast to coast stuff. But in '97, when we moved to Bend here, I was still with that produce company. So what had happened is, when my first wife and I were having problems and it came out that she had an affair, I left and was living in my produce truck.
Mm,
Yeah, until I found an apartment or whatever. I didn't have any family over here. I wasn't going to run to them. I was going to figure it out on my own. And Bend back then was not the easiest place to get a job. It really wasn't. Back then it was just a lot of people going to the mountain to ski, and there were restaurants, and there wasn't a lot of industry here. And so I didn't really have a lot of options of what I was going to do. So I stuck with the produce company, got myself a small apartment, and then we eventually in 2000 divorced. Um, my folks ended up helping me buy a house here. So that kept that connection together.
sure. They got you.
And
Yeah.
they got me. They got me. They were like, "Wow, he's been devastated. Let's lift our son up and really support and help him like good Christian parents." And that's kind of what happened. They did. They were very generous in that. And what was really interesting, the older they got, the more they started stepping away from their own rigidity, not
Hmm.
their belief system, but their rigidity.
Yeah.
They were more approachable. I think I have an older brother, and maybe the grandkids kind of softened them up and mellowed them out. But something happened to where they were like, "Look, we're our mission is going to be ending soon, and what are we going to do afterwards? We need to be around our children, so let's help them and get prepared for that." And that's kind of how it eventually fell out. Here in the end, they did come over to Bend and move over here after they retired, but I'm jumping ahead. So I got a house here, and I was single for 5 years, 5 years straight, and I was going to church, trying to figure that out. But I got involved in a running community. I got involved in AA. I went to AA and met some people there, and then that narrative kind of started changing my view. You know, the narrative of AA and what sobriety means and what that's about, and you can have a higher power without all of this bullshit attached to it. So that is when I really started going, okay, I need to take another look at this Christianity thing, and I kind of took a step back. I was going to church, but I was really just trying to figure out what I was going to do for the rest of my life, to be
Yeah.
honest with you. Yeah. So,
So, how old are you about this time?
so I would have been in my late 20s, or no, I would have been in my early 30s. I have a younger handicapped brother. And so I decided to go ahead and join the school district and worked with their special education developmental disabilities program. And that's kind of where I was working uh, for about 13 years. And life was, just kind of like I found a plane to fly on, and it wasn't very bumpy, and I didn't have a lot of chaos for a while. I wasn't drinking. Um, Things were actually okay for me financially. I was just figuring it out. I was just about a decade late.
Yeah.
When I met my second wife, I met her at church. She was hanging out with my roommate, and I met her. He had brought her to church, and um, they invited me to hang out with them one day, and then out of that developed a friendship with my roommate's friend, who I ended up, marrying. She had come out of a pretty abuseful marriage, and physically and verbally abusive marriage, and so she just wanted to find a good Christian boy. And at the
Yeah.
time, that's kind of what I was. I didn't have a lot of rules, but this was my faith, and I was pretty casual about that. Um, and it worked for me, and so I didn't really invest in even trying to really capture what I wanted for myself. I kind of just got sidetracked on a really lazy plane, and didn't, wasn't motivated to make any other changes.
Yeah.
So I married Amy in 2005, and the first couple of years of our marriage was pretty tough. She was really responding to her past relationship with her abusive husband. She was waiting for the shoe to drop for me to become abusive.
Yeah.
Um, and that just didn't happen. And so we had a lot of turmoil in the first several years of our marriage. But then in 2010, I thought that I was sober enough to pick up another drink.
Mm.
And I did. And I won't get into a lot of the details on that, other than I was actively looking to, after I had gotten married, I was like, I'm going to try for law enforcement again. So I was applying for different law enforcement positions around this area, Deschutes County. And one by one, I kept getting rejected. I'd get into the final phase of the hiring process, and I get rejected. And so I think I just started getting that feeling of I'm not good enough.
Mm.
I'm not going to be able to support my family, when I want a family. What happened was Amy and I were going through a pretty tough time. We had our second child by then. I still hadn't landed a good job. And probably after 30 times trying to get hired by the law enforcement, I said, fuck it. Went out drinking one night and got a DUI. And that
Mm.
was the first of three. Um, in 2012, and this is where I really want to get to, because this part of the story is kind of who I am today. And in 2012, I had started drinking early. This would have been in March. My wife and I had just had our fifth wedding anniversary, or excuse me, sixth wedding anniversary, and we both cried at the table, going, "What the fuck?"
Mm.
So we come home, and a couple of days after March 12th, 2012, like I said, I started drinking early, and that day ended in me having a standoff with the police, 17 police officers with their guns drawn, and a negotiator trying to get me out of a car with a loaded gun to my head. And I had reached a point, and I didn't know. I didn't know that the hole was so deep. But
Yeah.
I was sitting in a seat of a car going, is this really who I am? This is where I'm at in life? I have nothing to hold on to. I don't have anything that is real. Everything is fake. The job, the wife, trying to make it in this life, being accepted by my parents, having, producing grandchildren for them. All of that stuff means nothing to me because I hate who I am. I don't know
Yeah.
who I am. So, in that situation with the police, they had finally talked me out to the car, and I had um, a couple of moments with them where I was arguing with them and then immediately got hit by a police dog. I was taken down by police officers, had broke my shoulder, and basically the last thought I remember, my face in the pavement, was, God, if you are real, show me who you are and not what I want you to be for me.
Mm.
Because that popped in my head at that moment. It was like,
Yeah.
if you are real, then show me who you are, because I keep making you into something that constantly fails.
Yeah.
So that was a total detachment and brokenness of my ego. I had had a nervous breakdown in that moment. And from there, it was a clean slate for me. It really was. There's so much into it, but I took a clean slate. I was like, I have got to start out with me. I am not going to be getting better for this person or that person. I am going to figure out who I am right now.
Like we everyone has their moment,
Yeah.
and and everyone's moment kind of manifests or can be kind of different for everyone. My sister's child, he got out of AA, and the child that I knew, him growing up as a teenager, a young man, to who he is now, all I saw from a distance was someone who was living a life counter to God, hanging with the wrong crowd. I don't want to speak, his story, but doing things that were not appropriate over and over and over again. And he actually got to a point where, um, he passed out, and um, hit a glass table,
Hmm.
and the glass kind of cut open all his skin. And his girlfriend came in the room at the time, and I mean, it just looks like he was dead. There was
Mm-hmm.
blood everywhere. It was
Wow.
panic. Just a horrible, horrible scene. And he chose to go to AA. And it's work. That's the thing. A lot of people, it's like, dude, this shit takes work.
Yeah.
The epiphany is one thing,
Yeah.
the moment's one thing, but then how we respond to that moment, how we move forward, is a whole nother mountain climb up. But now looking at years later, he's found religion, he's found Christ, has a wonderful partner, they're engaged. And it's like, if you would have told me, I don't know, even 5 years ago, that he'd be in the place he is now, I'd be like, no, no way. So you had this moment, and this is like, I don't know, I think you do a really good job of, casually describing this moment. This moment, was, I don't know, just a second away from tragedy.
Yeah, so a couple of months after that situation, the police report came out, and in the police report, the one of the officers who had the rifle on me, out of the 17 police officers were there, he was pulling the slack out of his trigger in the moment the dog hit me and took me down. So he was pulling the slack out, getting ready to shoot me.
Oh my gosh.
And because it had been hours in that cul-de-sac that I was fighting and arguing with them and yelling at them and threatening them. And so obviously I had a lot of legal stuff that I had to deal with. And but during that experience and getting that report out and reading that is when it really clicked. You've got to do something different.
Yeah.
you know
You feel like it was a good rock bottom for you?
yeah, it was the rock bottom that needed to break me away from everything that I believed, everything that I was attached to, and to just say we're starting fresh. And that was later on in life. I was 40, 41, and here I am 55. So it's been 13 years, 13 plus years since that situation. And I mean, my faith today is that God doesn't give us anything we can't handle. And if we can't handle it, we learn how to handle it,
Yeah.
through the experience of others and through the interaction of people, and actually forming an honest conversation about things. So, like this today, um, I think we have a lot more in common than we are led to believe, right?
Oh, for sure.
Um, with that said, I also think that I had to find a place where um, I could just be okay with who I was, that I didn't need to act a certain way. I felt growing up that I was constantly acting, constantly trying to be good, constantly trying to meet my father's expectations and mother's expectations. And so breaking away from that leaves you with very little but your own expectations. And those of your employer or your spouse. But I don't have to contrive anything, and that's kind of how I roll today.
What is it? I think it's Carl Jung says life begins at 40.
Mm-hmm.
You truly are. You're just about right there time wise.
Yeah. Yeah.
We go through these cycles, where we eventually get to a point, and for every one of your situations, we hope that someone doesn't have to hit that bottom,
Absolutely.
but that's what you needed.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm glad, man, because I'm looking forward to getting to know you more as a friend living out here, and it's these moments where if just something went a different direction, you wouldn't have the opportunity, uh, to, I don't know, shine the light that you do shine now to the way that you can, and it's hard to think about in those moments, that if you get a little bit of distance from it, you start to kind of learn a little bit more about yourself and how you can help others.
Absolutely. Yeah. I really appreciate the fact that you guys have this space where, control groups can mean so many different things, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like that I grew up in a certain type of control group that later on controlled me into my adulthood, and pulled me in a direction that I could not escape the totality of what I thought the consequences would be if I did.
Yeah.
And today I've come to observe that if there are going to be consequences, okay, I'm okay with that. I don't have to live in fear of them. I don't have to worry about them. I think there's going to be a lot of if there is a day of judgment, and if that happens, there's going to be a lot of Christians who are going to be going, "What the fuck,"
Yeah.
Because, and I want to possibly be one of those people that says, "I just wanted to do my best in the end," you know, do my best for myself.
I think it's really interesting because I am very open about where people land in their kind of spiritual journey.
Hmm.
I'm also very open about, gosh, I really think that if you have an open heart and an open mind, that may be dynamic up until the very end. In terms of what your beliefs may be or how they kind of operate. Um, you're interesting with the people we chat on, and there's like people are across the board, but so at this point, um, through your journey, um, where do you find your spirituality lands?
My wife has this wonderful quote, and it could be Thoreau. I mean, it's that good. But she says, "You can live so heavenly minded that you have no earthly good." And so I really take that to heart. I want to live here for today. I want my children to know that they can come to me and say, "Hey, Dad, I was offered drugs today. This boy asked me to send him this today." I want there to be a level of input in my earthly existence that it's going to mean something to my children when they grow up and have to do this all over again, right?
Yeah,
So while my faith is grounded in the sense of I don't have to be um, pressured into believing that there is something greater than me, right? Um, I can believe that in the sense of I have an opportunity from that situation in 2012 to live in the sense that if there is a God, I want to leave this place better than the way I found it, right? The way I was raised. Um, I really live for my family today. They're the most important thing. It's amazing how, when you do hit a bottom like I did, I really recognize that they are humans just like me and needs just like I need. And so I've been really actively educating myself on being the best I can be for them and to provide them the opportunities that I didn't have when I was a kid. And so that builds my faith that there is something greater than me doing that because I know where I can go. I have tattoos all over my body that remind me of where I can go if I start being selfish,
yeah,
you know, because I don't have a good memory. And so I need these reminders on my body to say, "Hey, you don't want to drink today. You don't want to talk to your wife that way. You don't want to push your kids away because you are busy doing your thing." Those kinds of things um, have kind of helped me. That is my faith, to just be a good person to the people around me and be available, you know. And I think with you guys having this platform and being able to share your story, you're providing a space for people to come to that moment.
yeah.
Like, wow, I don't have to be locked up with what I've been through.
Well, I think it's great. I also think, and I mean, your story's so unique, like everyone else's, and that's the intent of having this podcast, and it's going to constantly evolve, like we all do. But yeah, just having genuine conversations where people can listen and to some extent relate and go, "I'm not alone in the struggle that is called life." People have been through shit. They've gone through, you know, all the way into the muck. They've gone all the way to the point of no return. And some, like yourself, have come back from that. and found a way to navigate forward. And I think it's just really powerful, man. I think it's really important that people hear, that for every one of you, there's countless people that unfortunately um, don't make it through it, and
Yeah.
it's really sad. And so every person that can navigate through that and has a voice like yourself, it's just in my mind so powerful. I think it's ironic. I was thinking about your story. The Mayan calendar ended in 2012.
Huh. Wow. That
Uh,
is
s-
interesting.
so your life calendar, ended in 2012, and now it's the unknown.
Hmm.
It's uncharted territory.
Absolutely.
Yeah, just kind of interesting how dates work out sometimes.
Yeah.
So I have a question. What are your thoughts on sobriety now, and do you still live sober?
I do. I've been sober since 2012.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good. Congrats on you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Do you still actively go to meetings, or do you sponsor anyone?
I don't. Um, I actually never went back to AA after 2010. Um, and it's not because I didn't think it was a good place or that their message wasn't right. I was able to just stop. I was like, wow, hitting the pavement like that, it just woke me up to where I have not even had the compulsion to drink or think about it. I do talk to guys who, have issues with alcohol or any substance abuse, but I don't sponsor anybody. But I do talk about my message to them. Yeah.
That's great. That's great to hear. I think I don't know. I've repeated this message, this concept before, but I think our modern society we live in, um, we are so compartmentalized out of the group tribe structure that many young men and women don't have uh, older ones, wise ones, if you want to even put that on it,
Right.
to go to.
Hmm.
Um, and it's often a situation where, like, man, if I bouncing ideas off of someone your age is not the same
No.
as genuinely talking with someone that's lived a life, lived uh, to give, just give that wisdom, bounce things off, and that's part of this conversation as well. As I know, there's younger ones listening. We've had a few 20 somethings on the pod that bring their youthful, hopeful energy. Um, it's also a hope of mine that they can hear some of the old guard go like, hey, we've been through some of this shit.
Yeah.
We're not perfect, but here's kind of some of the things we have to say about what we've been through. And Devin, I think your life story is like I said before, just a little bit different because when we talk about high control groups or kind of living in a controlling environment, um, I guess you could argue like I don't know, there were levels of control with how you were raised, but I don't know, could you argue like it wasn't necessarily a cult, you didn't live in this crazy high control environment, but a lot of the same mechanics can be used. It's like they say sometimes, you have narcissistic traits
Hmm.
versus a full on narcissist. And it looks like to some extent, like your father and the upbringing you have, he had some of these control levels that really carried with you your whole life.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
that made it really challenging for you um, to kind of get to the point that you got that required some pretty drastic measures.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say the isolation of that camp for so many years and not being able to interact with the outside world or to get news. We never had TV. We didn't
Mm,
get TV till I was 19, out of the house. That's when I first started watching TV and the news and all of that and what that's about and the Johnny Carson show and all of that stuff is like, whoa, this is going on too. So while I wouldn't necessarily say it was a cult, it was the control came out of the isolation,
yeah.
and it was very easy to keep us in line. in that sense, you know.
It's you when you talk about like starting to go to, as we wrap up, and start to experience these things that, a teenager, it is true. It's like, whoa, like I've never experienced this before. Like, I think about something as simple as, as you we don't have any idea about this, but we can maybe find a parallel. Like, think about a Mormon person that finally gets out of that religion and goes, "What's a cappuccino?"
Right. Yeah.
Like, I don't even know what that is. Like, and they could be 30, 40, 50 years old, and they're just like, "Dude, I don't have any idea. I know what coffee is. I just never had it before." So that could happen with any sort of group, but
Hmm.
I think your situation is really unique, man, and I'm really thankful for you sharing. Um, I guess as we start to close out, is there any other thing that, people that are listening, that you really think like, hey, I really want to use my voice in this moment to kind of, say this part of my life as we close out, or anything kind of pop up that you want to make sure we address?
Yeah, as I'm just brainstorming quickly on that, I would just say that, all of our upbringings are relative. And so each of us have unique experiences that shape our lives. And it's really coming to a point where you can finally say, hey, I can ask myself this question: is this life that I have, these beliefs that I have, are they mine, or are they modified by something, or by some experience in our life? And I would just say, I think it does have something to do with the older you get, the more you can review and have a little bit more information to really evaluate, to give yourself the option to think for yourself,
Yeah.
right? And I think we live in a day and age now where we have so much coming at us, and it's crazy times in
Hmm.
our world. Not just America, but in our world, it's crazy times. And there's the digital age is upon us, and we can really start using that is what we listen to. Well, it really does not allow us to be an individual. And so, while it's helpful in so many ways, I think it's also a controlling mechanism in ways too. And the narrative that is being spent out there, and you have to dig deep for the truth these days. And I think that's what it really comes down to, is the truth, and what that looks like for an individual.
Yeah, I think in my opinion, and I'd welcome yours too, Trent. Everyone's truth, it's interesting because there's only one truth, but at the same time, uh, our heart and kind of what we need is unique to all of us.
Absolutely.
And so to some extent, there can be multiple truths.
Hmm.
And I speak to, some people find comfort and solace knowing that, they believe in the Shinto religion, and they believe in commies, and they believe that that is real, and that, this rock has a spirit creature that lives in it, and this plant has a spirit creature that lives in it, and each of you have your own unique spirit that lives in it. And the Shinto faith in Japan is nothing like the Christian faith, but that truth works for them.
Right. Right.
And as long as that truth that works for them doesn't give these layers of guilt and shame and control, and still allows them to guide themselves on their path, to kind of seek their own personalized version of truth, I love that for each of them.
Yeah, I would love that for everybody.
Yeah.
What I think is unfortunate is that today there's a cacophony of voices online and all around us with just as many different truths, and they're
Mhm.
all fighting each other in the algorithm
Yeah,
and on TikTok and on web results. And it's a little harder these days to figure out what absolute truth is.
right.
Maybe
Hmm.
there's more subjective truth out there.
There's a lot of pressure to find one.
Yeah.
And so I really, I just want to encourage people out there who are in that mode and seeking truth to really evaluate what's good for me, right?
Yeah.
Am I feeling controlled out of fear? Am I feeling controlled out of guilt? Or is this actually making me a better person for my neighbor,
Hmm.
and for my community? Is it motivating me to participate in life? And that's the question that I have to reevaluate for myself is how am I going to participate with my family today,
Hmm.
the people I interact with, and um, and not also hang on all of the darkness that is trying to get in through the web, through the internet, through the
Yeah.
news to try and dissipate peace.
Sure.
I think any and every religion also has this aspect of coming to a place of peace, and peace can be the same for a lot of people in that respect. So being open-minded about that, I
Yeah.
think, is important.
I
Yeah.
think I think after listening to just a portion of your life, and like any of our guests, you're more than welcome to come back on if there's another chapter that you want to discuss.
Yeah.
We are here for you, my friend.
Thank you.
What I hear though, and I think is the ultimate encouraging thing for me is the hard path that you had to take to get here. It is no doubt bearing fruit in your kiddos.
Thank you.
That's some of the hardest thing to do, is to not carry those shadows and that
Hmm.
darkness onto the next generation.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
I think it's just so comforting for me to see that the path that you took to get where you're at, it is going to be better results for your kiddos, which I think is amazing.
Yep.
And I think on a lighter note, you made it through another rapture.
Yes, I
Uh,
did. It was
we
supposed
Yeah,
just
to
just this
happen.
last week, right?
Wasn't
uh,
it like Thursday or
yeah.
Wednesday?
So, we all know that it comes like a thief in the night, yet somehow people keep forgetting that.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Uh,
mean,
so
it it's, hey, it's that control. It's like, hey, if
yep,
we can control
Yep.
the coming back, then we can control God,
yep,
and God says, no, whatever God you believe in, that God is always going to be like, no.
yeah,
I wanted to say before we wrap up too, even though you were raised in a fundamentalist Baptist organization, so much of what you have said about how you were raised and your life experiences, so many of the people who were raised witnesses will identify with, because when you're highly controlled, a lot of the same symptoms show up.
Hmm.
So it was interesting, very interesting, hearing your perspective and hearing you talk about things that I've heard a lot of ex witnesses talk about and ex Mormons. It's like this different brands of the same type of control.
yeah. Those levers that get pulled kind of seem to be the same techniques over and over again.
Hmm.
So it's a wonder why it continues to keep working. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and then and then also no doubt, Trent always going through his sobriety. It's always good, no doubt, for Trent to have a partner in crime on the podcast that's been through that as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Congratulations, buddy. Yeah.
Thanks, man. You too.
it's a constant. But Devin, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for spending it with us. Like I said, whenever you want, if you got another thing to say on the pod, we welcome you back. And we know that these discussions can be tough. There is a level of vulnerability to put yourself out there, and hopefully that we gave you the right space. And if you feel like you need more, please come on back. So for Devin, for Trent, for everyone that's listening, thank you so much for donating some of your time as well. Time is super precious, and we'll talk with you soon.
Thank you for joining us on this journey in this era. If you found today's episode valuable, please share it with someone who might need it. Check the podcast description for our socials and other information.
Please consider supporting us at Patreon at patreon.com/culturepod. If you'd like to tell your story, please contact us at cult.ture.pod@gmail.com. Until next time. Stay curious, stay critical, and stay free.